All right, we are back here on 6 Degrees of Associations podcast, joined for a reunion episode today with Dean West of Association Laboratory. He's dialing in today from the shores of Lake Michigan, outside of the Beltway Association space, strong outside of the DC area, as we know, and Dean's a great representative of that. Dean, for those that missed that episode that we'll link to in the description today, it's been, well over 4 years now since we last had you on. Remind us who you are and what you're all about.
Sure. Well, it's a rich tapestry. It's hard to, pick which thread really to draw out of it. We often hear our friends in associations talk about how they fell into association work. I actually specifically sought out association work. I grew up in central Iowa, and my father was a politician and suggested I become a lobbyist. So following my university days at Iowa State, I cold called on associations in Des Moines, Iowa, and showed up at their door and said, "Hi, I'm Dean West, and I want to be a lobbyist someday, but I'm not sure how to do it." I eventually got hired by the Iowa Medical Society, where I was their in-house lobbyist and their political action committee director. And those were my first forays into association management. I then moved to an association management company in Chicago because I realized it was easier to live in Chicago than to drive there every weekend from Des Moines, where I was an account executive and acted as the assistant executive director of the American Society of Clinical Oncology. I eventually worked through a couple of executive director jobs until I started Association Laboratory 25 years ago this year. This is our 25th anniversary. And I'm president and founder of Association Laboratory. And we do kind of three big things. One, we are a research and strategy firm that works across the domains for associations. We work in membership and strategic planning, meeting value proposition, education, DEI, et cetera. We're by far the leading source of sector research on the association industry. The Our Looking Forward brand, that's a free dashboard where visitors can come to it and I want to look at just trade. I want to look at just CEO respondents. I think we have 13 or 14 different studies up there that are trended. And then we produce educational content and experiences for association leaders. So for example, in February of 25, we'll do our third annual Reimagining the Future of Healthcare Summit, which is a healthcare association CEO and senior strategy staff think tank here in DC. That Thursday, we do a membership seminar and a meeting seminar called Table Talk. So those are the three prongs. We're having a great time and great year, enjoying the team and all that kind of stuff. And yet on a beautiful fall day, as I look out the window, I still just want to sit in my backyard and not do anything.
Yeah, no, I get that. We all have those days where it's the weather outside's looking a lot better than the fluorescent lights of the office or home office. We've had some pretty great discussions lately on this podcast about running events and member experiences. And, Donald D joined us, he who actually founded one of those extremely important tech-focused association events. And so there's more too that I'm blanking on. But tell me about what you've learned about running an event in the association space. I mean, how complicated can that be? And what have you learned? And what are your takeaways?
Well, you can make it as hard as you want. I think the mistake people have historically made is they've tried to appeal to everyone, because 10,000 people writing a $1,000 registration check is better than 1,000 people writing a $1,000 check. It's a numbers game on the revenue side, but it's difficult to produce a cohesive activity for a diverse audience, just by definition. So I think first, many of our meetings folks try to be everything to everybody, because the goal is how do you get as many bodies through the door? Okay. Second mistake is much of our meeting planning professionals and the hospitality industry are effectively real estate agents. If you compare a modern day, I wrote a blog on, I think 2 years ago in September. If you're going to buy a house, if this is a 3-bedroom house, it's got a pool, it's close to schools. If you go to a hotel advertising, we have 500 rooms, 100 suites, 1,000 square feet of whatever, and we're near the airport. That's effectively the same conversation. So our hospitality folks are real estate agents and our meeting folks are real estate buyers. none of that matters to your attendees. So what we do for our events, for example, is we define a very precise audience that we're trying to serve. So for example, for healthcare, you're a healthcare association CEO or a senior strategy staff, chief membership, chief meetings, chief education, something like that. We're not designing it for everyone who works for a healthcare association. Second is we design the program, then we worry about the facilities. And the logistics and the food and the drink and all those sorts of things. We don't lead with amenities of the real estate. We lead the program. The third thing that I think is escaping people, particularly on senior level events, is if you are a senior level person in your industry, sitting in a darkened room full of other various folks from various backgrounds, passively listening to a speaker, passively listening to a panel just doesn't help you. So our events are very collaborative. We've been doing events now for a number of years. We're well regarded as a collaborative educational environment. You will come to our events and you will solve problems with your peers. We specifically have a networking strategy at our events. This is how you're going to meet everybody. This is how you're going to work with peers on solutions. It's not about panels. It's not about speakers. It's not about, do we have rainbow balloons above the podium or some other, vanity like that. It's about you're going to fix a thing when you come to our events. Because as a company, we have a strong research skill set. So we use that research to inform the conversations. But we also have a strong facilitative skill set. And then we have a strong capture what people say skill set. That's what research and strategy firms do. So our job is to convene people, give them a frame of reference to solve a problem, capture what they talk about, and reproduce it for others to learn from, as opposed to, okay, come and sit in this darkened room and listen to another three, people on a panel who are unprepared, just give you their opinions on what they think works. So I think those are kind of three big things. You've got to pick an audience and you've got to be serious about it, and you're going to lose people as a result. You've got to design program first and worry about your logistics last. And three is, particularly senior level folks, you've got to have a solutions orientation, active engagement, not a passive learning environment.
Definitely. And, niching down, programming first, sounds like key. What about getting into some of those logistics which come last for you, it sounds? Do you rotate the meeting? Is it in different locations? Do you have an online component? Just a little bit about the logistics.
Yeah. Our healthcare conference is the one. We're now doing our third annual. We've been doing events now for 7-8 years, but it's probably our most substantive company activity. And if I hired a meeting planning tomorrow, he or she would probably laugh at how little effort we put into meeting planning. We don't do it at a hotel because hotels are expensive, frankly. We do it at the Orthopedic Learning Center in Rosemont. It's got things like free parking. By the way, Chicago is a huge center of healthcare associations, probably larger than DC. DC's not the big one. So we have free parking. We have state-of-the-art, high-tech AV. We can do interviews. We can have people come in. I mean, we've got screens bigger than my house. So everything's got mics. You can record stuff because it's designed to teach surgeons how to do surgery. So all the AV, all the things you need to produce a good educational program and make it easier on your attendees. But now think of my audience. You know what? I can't compete with the fancy hotel on their reception. They're going to do a better job. It's their job I don't have a chef. So we don't try to. Our food has to be sufficiently high quality. Okay. No one's coming to our event to have the best lunch ever. Okay. We don't have a lot of bells and whistles. We don't have a custom website. None of those things drive the attendance decision of our market. Our biggest competitor is the 10,000 other competitors to their time. If you're a healthcare association CEO, you got a lot of people who want to spend time with you. There's a lot of meetings you might go to. Why us? And so and we'll never be a competitor on the logistics and amenity side of things. It's a bunch of money they don't care about. They've been wined and dined. They've been to the nice restaurant. They've gone to the reception on the carrier in San Diego. They've done all that stuff. What they've got is a problem they can't solve. And it doesn't help them to sit in a giant dark room, listen to some panel of their peers telling them stuff they already know. And so we compete on the program design. Our logistics side has to be sufficiently good. Okay, so I can't have them meet a sandlot. It has to be sufficiently good. So, for example, we don't have a room block. Stay wherever you want. I don't know what brand you're loyal to, but there's a bunch of hotels around. I stay in the Hampton Inn across the parking lot because I can walk there. I've stayed in much nicer hotels. I wish it was a nicer hotel, but it's also pretty inexpensive, and I can walk across the parking lot to it. You're 5 minutes from O'Hare. Okay, so you can get out if you don't want to stay for the reception. So no custom website. Our marketing is heavily person to person. We use our attendees as part of the marketing channel. And so if you're an attendee case, we go to you and like, hey, I'm glad you're registered. Who do you think should be in that room to make that network worthwhile to you? Give me their name, or you invite them. Here's a link. And so it's an attendee-driven program. It's attendee-driven marketing because I want you as an attendee to talk to people you want to talk to, not the people who just randomly show up. So we curate who's invited. We curate the topic. And my wife hates that word, but, we use our attendees to design what we're going to talk about. And we use our attendees to tell us who should be in the room. And so we've turned down people like, can I attend? You cannot. We've told people want to invite folks. I'm currently with one of our subject matter experts. She wants to invite some people. I'm like, remember, this is our network goal. So we have a networking strategy that's part of the meeting. And I think that'll be the new innovation. I think you'll find it in meetings as you'll have a specific networking strategy for your meeting, not just an education strategy, a marketing strategy. How do you make sure the people who show up meet the people they want to meet? And as opposed to leaving it to random chance. So that's a long-winded kind of response to your question, Casey. I apologize on that. But I think the mistake a lot of people are making, particularly senior level audiences, they're just not going to be impressed by, the bells and whistles around your event. That doesn't differentiate you from anything,
It sounds like your strategy is clear. It's like lead with great programming, led by, curated by the attendees, and the rest will follow. Are you not having an online component because you're incentivizing people to actually be there in person, which we've talked about on this podcast before. We find it to be time and time again in person being so much more powerful than online, despite all the technology advances.
So I think you have to either decide to do it online or you decide to do it face to face. We find that hybrid events are it's hard to serve two masters, I guess is how I would say it. For complicated topics that require a great deal of human interaction between peers, face-to-face is by far the most effective technique. Online works really well for more passive information transfer. I want to tell you, here are 3 things we think work. Thanks for telling me that, Dean. But if you and I, Casey, want to work together on a shared problem, first of all, we have to understand, are we looking at the problem from the same direction? That's a complicated thing. Now put 5 of us in the room. And now we want to talk about solutions, but I want to talk to somebody else about solutions, maybe a peer association. So I don't want the American College of Surgeons talking to some, minor subspecialty dentist world about, because they're just different scopes, different organizations. Okay. And so the face-to-face for us becomes critical to the success of the networking strategy and critical to the success of the education strategy, which is designed to produce a white paper on what the attendees have learned. Now, when we do webinars, for example, our sector research, one is we do them for free because we're trying to extend the reach of our sector research. We do collaborative workshops online because we're trying to make them accessible for a wide variety of people. But as I move from, okay, it's free, anybody's welcome, to it's paid, but because we want you to learn, so it'll be all membership people or meeting people, to we have an audience of very senior experienced people trying to solve really hard problems. You move from a passive webinar to a Zoom collaboration to a face-to-face event. And it's a pyramid based on your goals within each activity. And our sector research is free because we're trying to cast a wide net. Okay. our online seminars are affordable because we're trying to make it accessible, but we also have to pay for stuff. And then we price our face-to-face events at a premium because you're going to solve problems and you're going to be with a great network, not just some room full of randos who happen to show up.
We talk about the difficulty of, quote, serving two masters. I know I've had a discussion on this podcast before about the balance of keeping attendees and sponsors happy. And is that a part of your thought process going into these meetings? Is there a sponsorship component? Talk to me a little bit about that dynamic.
Historically, we had sponsors. The good news of that was we made more money. So, and I own the business. I'm always happy to take people's money. I kid about that all the time. The downside was it increased staff time to manage a sponsor. And the more sponsors, the more staff time. And two, it was hard to get even well-meaning sponsors to up their game as educators. So some of the smartest people I know in the sector are incredibly terrible educators and presenters. And if it's, them and I sitting around a table, man, I'll sit there all day and listen. But they're terrible presenters. They're terrible educators. Okay. And so we found the sponsors took a lot more time on our management. The requirement to credit them took time away from the program, and our ability to ensure a level of high quality instructional design and presentation and facilitation skill set got diminished. So we sacrificed the revenue from sponsors to give us 100% control over the program design and execution. And so from my standpoint, just financially as a company, okay, that costs me $5,000, $10,000, let's say in a sponsorship for a half-day program. Well, if the community we create around that event picks me up a $100,000 client, that's a pretty fair trade-off. And I think that's the thing. So in our sector research, because it goes into our evolution, Casey, one of the top competitor associations right now is for-profit firms. We're one of those firms. We're a CAE provider. We're, officially approved by ASAE to provide CAE credits. It's not hard logistically to put, logistics for 50 people, and we don't even have a project schedule on it. Probably should, but it's also easy that we don't think of, we're not doing a 50,000 person convention. Well, one of the challenges, I think, for our association folks is the bureaucracy to produce an event. I've got to get my board on board. I've got to get speakers. I've got sponsors I've got to manage. I've got to find somebody to facilitate. So they call me or one of my team. I've got to find somebody to on and on and on and on. It's really hard. None of this is hard for us. We produced our first healthcare event in 30 days or 90 days, excuse me. And so from a competitive standpoint, the more you make it difficult on yourself to produce that event, just by definition, the harder it is to make money and compete. So from our standpoint, as a small firm, you're kind of like, who are we trying to serve? How are we trying to make our instructor design and program differentiated from other options? How do we personalize that program to their needs? And how do we fit that one program to the broader portfolio of what we do? And I think a lot of associations, they look at, here's my big conference, and it just sits in isolation. Here's my fall thing, it sits in isolation. Here's my Hill Day, it sits in isolation. When that's a portfolio of experiences for your member or attendee. And you have to think of it as a portfolio approach. And that's how we take the face-to-face with the online, with the free webinars, with the consulting side, et cetera. So our sector research, which we do for free, informs the program. So we know that governance is an issue, so we've got a governance thought for it. Previous attendees have told us the details of that in healthcare. That gets reflected in our white paper, now an ebook, called Reimagining the Future of the Healthcare Association. So all those dots connect, where a lot of companies, a lot of associations look at everything in isolation.
Yeah, Dean. And I've been asking a lot about the member events, the meeting aspect of your organization. And it appropriately does intersect with a lot of the service lines of your business. So, but tell me just personally, what excites you the most of the service lines that you're offering this association community? What keeps you motivated, excited? intrigued.
Well, so I'll be a good, like, since this election, I'll be a good politician, give you a complete roundabout, answer to it. So our sector research, we go out to association executives and we say, what's impacting your members? What challenges that create for you? And what are you doing about it? That's our 3 studies. Okay. Under looking forward brand, but that's a sector-wide scan. It's by far the most comprehensive scan of our sector in existence. Okay. So that tells me what the industry's doing. Okay. Then I pull 20, 30, 40 people in a room on a topic like membership or meetings or on an industry like healthcare. And we say, all right, let's dive in. What are the, we got this broad scan. Now, what are the real issues within healthcare or within membership? And then we take those lessons and we work with one of our clients, let's say on strategic planning or membership, and narrow it down even further. And I think what fascinates me about all of this is you get the opportunity to just completely attack these incredibly complicated issues. Not always problems, but they're often opportunities in a very in-depth, very evidence-driven way. And that's just fun. You're not producing the same old thing year after year after year. You're not dealing the same thing year after year after year. And I'm in year 25, and I'm still learning stuff. I still learn this stuff in sectors I've been involved with for nearly 40 years. And that's what's fascinating about it. And my goal at Association Laboratory is to try and capture and extend the learning of that through various mechanisms. If you can't afford to hire us for consulting, you can come to a webinar, that kind of thing. And so I think that's where I really enjoyed it. And to give you a sense, I can joke, the breadth of our client base goes from the American College of Surgeons on one effort to the Institute of Makers of Explosives on the other, to the Assistance League, which is like a social services organization, and Zonta, which is a women's advocacy organization. So when you think of the breadth of all these entities we work with, it's just a fascinating environment. That's what makes it fun. Is to learn what works here and what works there and what's common across all these people.
Yeah, and you've been in the association space, as the head of Association Laboratory for 25 years, as we discussed, and then in a lot of different leadership roles in associations before that, working for associations. It's a cliche question, but I'm super curious. What's changed in this industry over the years for the better or for the worse or for somewhere in between?
I don't think everything's almost to the better. I think in 2 ways. When I began in an association management company, AMCs were not particularly well recognized as part of the profession. There were these kind of supplier companies that sat over there and served small associations. That ASCO at the time, which is now a behemoth in Alexandria, they had a $7-8 million budget, being run by an AMC. And so my early professional path saw me as an account exec, acting as executive director, be accepted as a professional, frankly. Where working at AMC is a really good place to spend your career. The big firms, well-known ones too, the Kellens, the MCIs, the Smith Bucklands, the Bostroms, et cetera, are phenomenal places. You'll work on different industries. That's a career track in and of itself. And that's expanded in its accessibility and rewards over the last 25 years. When I started Association Laboratory in 1999, the consultant crew was not particularly well developed. I joke most of the consultants were some fired CEO who basically said, no, I'm a governance consultant or a strategic planner. But there weren't firms or people who had dedicated themselves to understanding how to apply their skill set, which is what consulting is. So that's a whole career track. You can come work for me for a decade, never work for an association kind of thing. The supplier side, think of all the tech companies. All those tech companies don't exist 30 years ago. The IMUS's, the Higher Logics of the world, that's a new industry sector. So you have entire career tracks within the association industry that didn't effectively exist 30 years ago. And so you can work for an association management company. They can move to a captive, our standalone association. You can come work for a consulting firm. Then you can go back to either of them, And so your opportunities in our sector have never been better to work. The next big thing is we have tools we would have dreamed of having 25 years ago. I spent a couple hours on, I'm educating myself on AI because I'm smart and because the promise of AI is I do less work, which is actually one of my goals. Work less. And as a tool for us as a firm, it has just phenomenal benefits in terms of saving time, improving the quality of work, all this good stuff. And if you'd have handed me that when I was 25, oh my God. So we've never had more options for career pathways within our sector. We've never had a better portfolio of tools to help us be successful. And culturally, we are no longer committed to simply reproducing what we've done every year for the last 50 years in our organizations. Again, the next fall conference, the next annual meeting, the next Hill Day, the next quarterly newsletter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of that legacy portfolio is being reevaluated very, very aggressively right now because it's applying less to the needs of a next generation professional. So I think it's never been a better time to work in associations than right now.
Dean, as we work towards wrapping up, a little tradition on this show as we invite guests to, nominate someone in their network in the association space that you think we need to hear from as well on this program. I'd love to put you on the spot here and see if there's a name that you might throw our way.
I think there's a couple. One is, and he's already been interviewed a bunch. He probably interviewed was Tony Russell. He's about to publish a book on membership. There are a few people. Membership is routinely rated the number one challenge by associations. Top of the list out of our sector research. Very, very few people know more about the issues than Tony Russell at MGI. And he spoke at our membership summit. And he's just a giving, great person. And you can tell him, I said he's also old. He's going to be gone eventually and retire. And the loss of his expertise out of our sector is hard to replace. I can't think of anybody who knows as much about it as he does, and has been so, frankly, good about giving his time. So you probably already interviewed him at some point, but he's not some stranger. On the consultant side, I'd recommend Cecilia Sepp. One of the reasons I'd recommend her, one is she's worked for me, by the way. She worked at Association Laboratory about 10 years, left probably 10 years ago. But she's working very hard to kind of professionalize consultants within ASA circles. And it goes back to, I started the company, there wasn't a consulting core. There was, I was the only one I knew in Chicago. And I was just some kid in his young 30s, In some of the firms you see, like mine and McKinley and others, they barely existed 25 years ago. And so a lot of the names that we're familiar with, the individual consultants that have now been around a long time, and she has a very good perspective on how the consultants have evolved as a profession, and has a very good perspective on the role of consultants within the broader association profession. And so I think she's got an innovative kind of mindset about it. And to the extent you're interested in kind of the ecosystem of associations, that's a really good one. Another one I would offer up, this is my last one, and she's the CEO of the Orthopedic Learning Center, OLS, where we do our events. And Lisa Pecorius, she's run Smith Buckland's meetings division. And she's been CEO for 8-9 years, I'm guessing, at OLC Center. So OLC Center is a specialty CME and surgical education facility owned by a bunch of healthcare associations in Rosemont. Okay. So they have the labs and the operating tables and the whole bit. But she sees both the association folks that come through, the for-profit folks that come through, multiple associations, and her perspective on how you have to design events, cater to different audiences, things of that nature, is just very well seasoned from her historical association experience to her current CME, surgical skills experience, and just a really just sharp person as a CEO. And so when I think of a couple of people you might talk to, there's some other folks, and I could come up with more names. There's some really smart people. Vicki Luis is CEO of SALS. If you haven't talked to her, probably one of the more innovative strategists in our sector right now. She's hard to get interviewed because she's too busy being successful. But I watched her grow their global expansion. Some other names you would know. Greg Melia is busy expanding the customer experience professional association globally. Well-known in association circles and ASA circles, but he's got a small organization really without a lot of heavy resources. But to watch him navigate resource constraints and position his group globally against groups who have much more firepower than he was fascinating to watch. So Regan Lowe would be one. So Vicky, Greg. If you want to have a little fun, I would say Matt, who runs Assistance League, he is responsible for an organization dedicated to community volunteering, and he's a CEO based in LA. And they are just reformulating how they're going to do everything. Many of the social groups like Lions Club and Kiwanis have just had long strings of fewer members and aging members and stuff like this. And he is effectively reorganizing their entire entity to improve the likelihood and engagement of people volunteering at the community level. So, for example, he's getting rid of their membership model because he goes, you shouldn't have to join and be a member in order to volunteer for us. It's a barrier to participation. So that's an example of some of the innovations he's doing. And it's not all figured out. By the way, he's just starting that process.
I mean, the amount of people you just rattled off, the networking has probably been a key to your success over the years in this industry, just based on that alone. I think this conversation has been unique and amazing, being able to pick your brain on what's changed in the association, and you're very transparent about the different approach that you have than other organizations might traditionally have, especially when it comes to the meeting and events space. I mean, stripping away everything but what the attendees actually want to gain is important. And I think the message is clear. And I really would love to talk to the CEO of the Orthopedic Learning Center, because that's a really unique situation and venue. And I'd never heard of that before. So yeah, that's a unique thing that the association, that, you know, those type of things that are going on in our association space, and I want to know more about it. So Dean, thank you again for your time today. I'm gonna let you get back to it. Dean West has been our guest today. He's the founder and president of Association Laboratory. Just a behemoth of information today from Dean. I'm loving this, and I want to continue this conversation in the future as well. Thanks for your time today, Dean.
Happy to be here.